Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the part four of four CSINext December 2024 Procrastinators CEU workshop. It's been a good morning, good afternoon for everybody. Appreciate the presenters, and we're really excited to close this out with Greg and Josh with Kingspan, and they are uh, going to uh, do a presentation on the profitability of healthy spaces. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to you, Greg, and let you introduce your team. Uh, and just like the other presentations, at the end of it, there will be a webinar survey for your CEUs or certificates. If you have any questions, type them in the chat box, and we will get to those at the end. A little bit of material and keep the flow. If it's urgent, just raise your hand, and uh, um, we'll go ahead and jump on it at that moment. But with that, I'm going to hand it off to you, Greg.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. I appreciate it. And yeah, so I'm sharing my screen, so I'm going to utilize Daniel as my kind of eyes and ears. I can't see the chat box or hands raised or anything like that. So if something comes up, Daniel will let me know. It sounds like this is I know this is the fourth for some of you. It sounds like the fourth of four today. So I think I might draw the short end of the short straw here, going last on a Friday of four presentations, but we'll do our best to keep it flowing, keep it interesting for everybody. Um, my name is Greg Trayer, so I am the Director of Sales for Kingspan Light Air North America. I know Josh Thurston is on here as well. Josh is one of our regional sales managers based out on the West Coast. We may have some other folks popping in as well. Again, I can't see the room, so I don't know who all is in there, but there may be some other folks from KLA that jump on as well. So really, the as Daniel said, this CEU is called the Profitability of Healthy Spaces, and really what this is about is daylighting, translucent daylighting, and really the effects that it has on the buildings, to the workers, to the occupants. So we're going to kind of go through what that means, why it's important when you're designing your buildings with daylighting. We'll go into some options and products that are available, different materials that you can use with the daylighting, and we'll also go through which everyone kind of loves, is some pretty pictures showing the incorporation of daylighting and what it can do for your building. So I'll just kind of jump right in. This is just some copyright legality stuff around the presentation. This is an AIA certified course as far as getting a class. Getting a point. It's also certified with GBCI for green building as well. So as far as the course overview, like I mentioned, this is around natural light and air. It's right there in our name, Kingspan Light and Air. We do have a little bit more of an emphasis on the light section than the air section of this presentation. It's a little bit more focused on light and natural light, but it's really about that built environment and bringing that light into the building and the importance of it, because it's something that's often overlooked, I think, in the initial design phases of architecture. So some of the learning objectives of the course, like I said, we're going to go through the well-being of the occupants, why that's important. We'll go through different methods of daylighting, from wall lights to skylights to canopies. We'll talk through different strategies. We'll go through the materials that are commonly used with daylighting, and then we'll kind of lastly show the application, where and how it's used in day-to-day buildings. So as far as an introduction, obviously when that building's first getting designed, a lot of the times it's focused on how big is the building, what's the layout, what type of technical stuff am I going to do, how do I weatherize that building, and that's a lot of the primary concern. But what often is overlooked is the actual occupants of the building, the ones that are going to be in there, whether that be working, shopping, educating day in and day out, and it's often overlooked. It often is thought of almost as like, maybe wishful thinking or impossible due to the budget. But when you think about the well-being of the occupants in the design process, it affects so many people, and we'll kind of go into those benefits. But not only the occupants, the owner, the business itself, the operators, there are so many benefits that a lot of people don't realize that come from being in a properly lit space. I think we would all agree nobody wants to go into work every day in a 10 by 10 space that has no windows, no ventilation, no fresh air. You want a nice, pleasant place to work in, and that's a lot about what this talks through. Um, so as far as the occupants in the building, that's kind of what I just said. That availability of natural light, air, ventilation are all things that occupants want day to day in their workspace. So that's the main portion of what we'll go through now. So there's a lot of numbers in here. Obviously, I wouldn't expect anyone to remember or memorize all these. Really, the big takeaway is the variety of benefits that come from that natural light, and vice versa, what the lack of natural light does. So this talks about how workers in offices that lacking natural light, they actually sleep less. So things that you wouldn't even think about that affect is, sleep. When you're not in well-lit buildings all day, you don't sleep as well at night. When you're not in a well-lit building, workers are generally more sad. They're more depressed due to lack of daylight. So those are all things that often get overlooked or not thought about, but that are really important. When they've measured, quality of life of employees, and you'd be surprised how much the environment they work in contributes to that. And that's really tied to the impact of the circadian rhythm, right? So, there's people say like, why is the sky blue? Well, there's another number of reasons that the sky is blue, but the sky being blue helps set your circadian rhythm. There's a reason that your phone has a like nighttime mode, right? That it darkens it. It takes it to more of a yellowish, orangish hue, right? That's your eyes and your body telling you it's time to wind down. It's time to go to bed, right? There's a reason that casinos don't have any natural light in them, so you don't know what time of day it is, right? And it messes with your system. So being on that right circadian rhythm is important to your day-to-day health and well-being, and working and living in natural light day in and day out will help keep that natural circadian rhythm in balance, which is really important to your health and well-being. Um, the studies would show that, when you talk about air quality, so we talked about light and air. So you not only have natural light, but you have the ventilation that comes too. When you're in space that is not have quality air, you're more prone to headaches, you get irritation in your eyes, your nose, you have difficulty concentrating because of, dry and stagnant air, where when you replace that with fresh air, you have a better response to crisis, you're better concentrate, better moods, right? There's obviously, you have places that are really important, hospitals and things like that. They have great air circulation, they have great light for a number of reasons, but one of them is it's really important that everyone is responsive and concentrating on all those things when they're in those important environments. Um, Benefits of healthy indoor environment. So the biggest perk for work is natural light. This is an example of a job. This is just a workspace. I think this job is shown again later. But the workers are just more attentive. They're more concentrating. It gives that workplace. You go to work every day. You want to work in an environment that's pleasant to be in, right? And so that's a big part of it. And then so that part's around the occupants, right? But there's also a lot of benefits to the actual owners of the building as well. So this was just a study from the World Green Building Council, but it talks about healthy buildings are 7% more, are worth more than standard buildings, right? So as an owner, if you're looking to resell a building, having that well-being and health is important. It's 46% of owners said healthy buildings are easier to lease, right? So as someone that maybe you're looking to own it and lease it, it's easier to lease, and you also get higher rent. So again, things that you may not think about every day, but they are really important. And for the owner, those factors of rent and how easy it is to lease is really important. And then also from a natural light and ventilation from the school system. They have a variety of tests out there, but whether that be math tests, reading tests, students are doing it better. They're doing it faster when they're in spaces that are well lit and well ventilated. This just talks a little bit more about ventilation and the the benefits of it. We already talked about kind of concentration, but with poor air quality, you get things like asthma and other illnesses. Ventilation goes hand in hand with daylighting
Yeah, yeah.
when it comes to things like test scores, paying attention, attentiveness, all those things that you're looking for, especially in a school environment. And then a retail setting. So people don't even think about the benefits to retail as far as if you are the owner of that building or someone that is selling product, because people are actually more likely to shop longer and buy more when they're in well-lit areas, which people don't even think about. Because when you're in a space that is naturally lit, you just spend more time there, you feel more comfortable there, and then in turn, you end up spending more money there. And so as someone that's thinking about as an owner who's building a retail space, that may not be something that they're thinking about, but as the designer, as the architect, it's something that we can bring to the forefront of their mind is the importance of that well-lit space and good ventilation, which just keeps people there longer, ultimately spends more money, which is ultimately what that owner of that retail space is looking for. So things that you wouldn't probably think of when you're thinking of a retail space, but that does actually come into play. So I think, like I said, I know there's probably a little bit of repetitiveness there, but I think it's important to understand that whether that is a school environment for the students, whether that is a retail environment for the shoppers, or whether it's just your workspace that you're working and living in every day, no matter which group you fall into, across the board, the benefits there for well-lit and well-ventilated spaces is extremely important. And to kind of go back to the original point is kind of often overlooked at the beginning of the process. And our goal is to make sure that you are educated, your customers are educated on all those benefits that aren't often thought of. So the next section just goes into how do we do that? How do we bring light into these space? What are the things that we should be thinking about? So kind of like I just said, bringing that light and air into it needs to be a priority at the beginning. It needs to be part of that early on design phase. And we can later on, as we wrap up, we can talk about some of the ways that there's assistance out there for incorporating that into the fundamental design of your building. The ways to do that. So you have translucent wall systems. So we're just going to talk about the different types of applications, but your wall system is obviously pretty self-explanatory. That's going on any of your four vertical walls as opposed to say canopies or skylights, which we'll get into later. But your wall system with translucent panels, you can have some unitized panels, and we'll get into the specific options later. This is more about the application. So where can I use it? So first would be a wall system. Second would be skylights. That's probably the most common way that people think of how do I get daylight into a building as a skylight. That seems to be the natural default. But as I just mentioned, wall lights is actually probably the most effective way and the most way that's probably overlooked. But skylights is the most natural way. So naturally, skylights are above you. There's a variety of options that you can look for. You'll see there at the bottom bullet, there's vaults, there's ridges, single slopes, pyramids. So there's a number of aesthetic ways that you can get light into the building using a skylight. The other way is canopies and walkways. So a lot of people think about the inside of their building with a skylight and a wall light into the building. And what's often not thought about is the entranceway to that building or the walkway into that building, out front of hotels, out front of, think about at an airport when you're waiting to get picked up. All those places aren't actually in the building, but are still connected to the building where you can bring there, it's actually less about bringing light in, and it's more about managing that light in the system. But there's a variety of design options out there, and those are the three main ways that you'll hear daylighting referred to. So you have side lighting or wall lights, you'll have top lighting or skylights, and then you have your canopies and walkways. Those are the three major categories of daylighting that you'll often hear referred to. And then the other portion on top of the daylighting is the natural ventilation, right? So there's wall and roof vents. You have some that are operable, you have some that are inoperable. So there's a variety of ways of getting natural ventilation in and out of the building, and making sure that the proper air quality. So obviously having that operable is important for if you want fresh air, you need to have the ability to get it, but there could be, if the air quality outside is bad, you want to actually block that out. So some people always think it's about getting air into the building, but often it could be about blocking the wrong air coming in. And then from a safety perspective, it could be around when you have smoke hatches and items that are letting air out due to a potential safety issue within the building. So natural ventilation then is the second part of that. So that's kind of where it incorporates. And now this section, we're going to talk a little bit more, we're going to talk more about kind of what to consider and what to think about with that natural light and ventilation. So daylighting strategy. I think we recognize that daylighting is still a bit of a niche area of expertise. And so when you talk about strategies, there's a lot of things that go into, there's a lot of science that goes into the daylighting, how to position your building, how to get the right light at the right time of day, how many foot candles, which is an expression that's used, is essentially how much light's coming into the building. And so I'm not going to spend too much time on the details here. The important thing to know, and we'll talk about a little bit later, is there's resources out there to help you. Some people are daylighting experts and some are not, but they want to learn more and they want to incorporate it in. And there is resources out there to help you as an architect, as a designer, to bring strategies and daylighting studies that can be done. And we can talk about that a little bit later, but just know um, there is a lot that goes into it that people don't think around the space and the position, and it's all things that assistance can be provided. Um, so there's a variety of daylighting strategies too. So that's which I kind of just wanted to talk a little bit about how to do that because the common way to bring light in is a window. It's a glass window that lets light in and gets you a great view. And then there's translucent daylighting, which gives you all the light and other benefits without the view. And there's pros and cons to both. But a lot of people think it's kind of one or the other. I'm either going to use transparent daylighting. I'm going to have glass and I'm going to get that view and everything else that comes with it. Or there's translucent daylighting, which is going to give me the natural light without the glare and the view. But the reality is there's strategies where you can incorporate both. And that's just an example here of kind of a view zone down below, because at the end of the day, people like to look outside and see trees and birds and all those good things. However, too much light can also be negative as well. So this is just showing where you can actually incorporate both transparent and translucent daylighting into your building with a variety of strategies. This just talks about the modeling portion, so I won't spend too much time on this, but there is daylight modeling tools out there. So there's some that you can go out and find on your own. We'll talk a little bit later. There's obviously companies that can help and provide that for you as well. But there is daylight modeling studies, software, and tools out there that can be used to really optimize the right light in your building when you're designing it. The main reason that translucent daylighting started becoming popular is because, like I talked about, the default is transparent. The default is glass, and there's a lot of benefits to it. The downside to that are things like glare and heat spots. So you're walking in the mall and you're in one of those kiosks and it's getting light and it's just a heat spot right there. If you're in an office trying to work, right? Glare on your computer, glare on a TV. So there's pros and cons to it. The con side to transparent is that a lot of times tied to that heat, that glare, those sunspots that are difficult to navigate. That's the main real benefit of the translucent daylighting is essentially what translucent daylighting does is it takes that light and it diffuses it and it evenly spreads it amongst your building, right? And so you don't get those heat spots, you don't get that glare, you don't get those sunspots. And it makes for a still well lit, still makes it feel like you're getting the natural light, but without some of the negatives that come with the direct sunlight. And so the next session talks about materials. So I've kind of been alluding to there's transparent, there's translucent, there's a number of different translucents as well. So we'll just kind of tie into what are the materials that are out there for your use. So as I talked about, the most common glazing is glass. You see that listed first there, insulated glass. The other ones you would have are fiberglass reinforced polymer. So you'll often hear that referred to as just fiberglass, or you'll hear it referred to as FRP. Those are all the same thing. You have commodity polycarbonate, and then you have more architectural grade polycarbonate. So those are your four main glazing options when you think about translucent or transparent light and bringing it into the building. So we'll kind of just dive into each of those. So insulated glass, the most common one, like we talked about. Years ago, we've gone to double pane glass. That's obviously the standard now. So two or more panels. Um, the benefits of glass, like we talked about, it allows that occupant to, see outside, right? It allows you to see the scenery. It allows you to see everything that's out there. The downside to it is that, like we talked about, the glare, things like that, that can be detrimental depending on how and you're using that space. Um, Glass is pretty long lasting, as you know. There's obviously maintenance that needs to be done with it, but it is a pretty long lasting product. Standard glass is recyclable. Obviously, recyclability has always been important. It seems like as we go on, obviously it becomes more and more important to everybody, whether that be owners, occupants, architects, and making sure that we're leaving this earth better when we leave it than when we came, and being able to have recycled content's important. So standard glass recyclable. When you get to the low E glass, that generally cannot be recycled. So the other second option then, when you move into more of the translucent space, is fiberglass or FRP. You'll also hear this referred to as a sandwich panel sometimes. So if you ever hear sandwich panel, they're often referring to this FRP. So it's a fiberglass product. So it's actually two fiberglass sheets that are bonded together to an aluminum I-beam structure. So you can kind of see in this picture, you'll see that grid pattern of those squares or rectangles. They're probably in this picture, they're probably 12 inches by 24 inches. So imagine a aluminum beam that has the structure every 12 or 24 inches, and then you take a sheet of aluminum and you adhere it on the bottom and you adhere it on the top, and that's why it's called a sandwich panel. And what you're doing there is, like we talked about, you're reducing the glare, you're reducing the hot spots, but you're still letting the light in. So it's more thermally efficient than glass, as you might expect. It's lighter than glass. And now the fiberglass itself can be repurposed, but the actual fiberglass material is not something that would be recyclable. Then you have what we would call commodity polycarbonates. So this is more kind of like you might see at a greenhouse, which is kind of what the picture is here. That's generally going to be a single panel system, usually something fairly thick, maybe like a 40 millimeter thick flat sheet of polycarbonate. It's usually designed for very industrial, as you said, greenhouse. Typically, not a lot of testing that's done on those, and generally, it's more of a low cost option that's out there. Um, it's not quite as popular. It's got a niche use to it, but the more common type of polycarbonate that you would see out there is your kind of architectural grade polycarbonate. So as opposed to one single thick panel, it is a more similar appearance and look to that sandwich panel, if you will. So it's actually a two panel system. So you would have a 10 or 12 millimeter piece of polycarbonate. You would have a metal frame, and you have another 10 or 12 millimeter thick polycarbonate. So it's a two panel system. um, Creates an air cavity in there. So the reason for that air cavity, usually you're going to see that panel system be somewhere between 3 and 4 inches wide. It allows for some sound control. It allows for some insulation. So it allows a little bit of flexibility. This product is used very similarly to your fiberglass product, right? Similar applications, wall lights, skylights, canopies. They just offer a little bit of a different aesthetic look, a little bit of different design options and flexibility. So polycarbonate generally adds a little bit more design flexibility. The other thing you'll hear sometimes is polycarbonate it's essentially, that's a fancy name for plastic, right? It's plastic, and a lot of times plastic is kind of equivalent. People in their mind think plastic is cheap. But polycarbonate is actually used in some pretty high technology items like eyeglasses and headlights and bulletproof glass and things like that. So some people mistakenly equivalent polycarbonate to or plastic to being cheap or not durable, when in fact it's quite the opposite. So those are your four main options for daylighting: the transparent, which is your glass, most common, and then the translucent, which is your fiberglass and your polycarbonate. With the polycarbonate system, so we talked about those four. So glass, fiberglass, your commodity polycarbonate, and then your architectural grade polycarbonate. The architectural grade polycarbonate actually has some removable skin technology as well. So you'll see here what I was talking about with a two-panel system. So you have one panel on the bottom, you see your metal framing, you have another panel on top. What this allows, because those two panels can be removed. So fiberglass, that sandwich panel, when manufactured and sent out, that is one piece. It's two panels adhered together, making it one piece of a system. So you cannot do this, unfortunately, with fiberglass. You can do this with polycarbonates, where you can actually remove the outer layer, the outer skin of that. So if you had a wall light or if you had a skylight and you needed to remove a panel or two because of damage or whatever that might be, you could actually do that without opening your building up. So you wouldn't have to open your skylight or you wouldn't have to open your wall, and you could go up there and replace panels. You see that picture has panels being removed, but you can see underneath it, the lower level, the second panel is still there. So for the occupants in the space, you're not leaving that open. So it just helps with the ability to do work and do renovation if needed without closing down a building. And the polycarbonate is recyclable. So when we talk about recyclability, unfortunately, we can't with the fiberglass, but we can with the polycarbonate. So that's something to keep in mind as well from a sustainability standpoint. So the translucent system. So we talked about there's polycarbonate and there's FRP, and kind of what are some of the benefits that come with that. So you can get long spans. You do have insulation options, right? So there is the ability in those panels. They are either a sandwich panel or a two-panel system that you can put insulation in there. Now, the whole point of a translucent system, right, is to let daylight in. So the more insulation you put in there, the less daylight comes through. So it's an option, but you also want to make sure you're balancing the reason that you're using translucent daylighting. But there is, at the end of the day, there's flexibility, which is ultimately what you want. So that includes not only insulation, but sound transmission. So you could have a building, if it's some kind of music or dance or something like that, if you're sharing wall space, you could actually have one wall that has increased sound transmission blocking that you don't have to have on the other wall because the other wall may be too open space. So you have some design flexibility around insulation, around sound, also safety and security. So these products can be used in, I think there's a couple slides in here, but if not, we'll talk to it. But in military, when you have to pass certain tests around 5-minute forced entry if it's on a military base and things like that. So these translucent systems gives you a lot of flexibility for any type of building that you might be designing, whether that's sound, security, insulation. There's a lot of options that are out there. You can get quite long spans out of these. And so the long spans aesthetically people like because less break, less supports. Also from an installation perspective, it helps. So with the polycarbonate, you can span up to about 40 feet. With the fiberglass, you're looking at about 20 feet. Now, what kind of horizontal supports you would need will vary based on where you install, with wind loads and snow loads and everything else that goes with it. So there is some horizontal support on the back of it, but from the actual panel, before you see any panel break, you could get runs with poly at 40 feet, and you could get runs with fiberglass to about 20 feet. So just when you're thinking about design and what options are out there. This is just insulation. I kind of touched on this already, but this is just showing a visual of it. So you see that picture up there. You'll see that insulation that is stuffed in there into the panel system. So obviously, you're doing that if you need to create a certain level of thermal performance. So a lot of people ask about our R value and what our R value is. Translucent daylighting does not use R value. It's a fenestration product, so it actually uses U value. So U value is essentially just the inverse of R value. So you'll see a lot of U values for translucent daylighting around 0.2, between zero point 0.2 and 0.3 is what you'll typically see, which if you convert that to R values around a 3 or 4. With U value, essentially the lower the better, if you will. So our standard might be a point. And when I say standard, there is really no standard because it takes into account how thick is your system. Are you using a white panel, a blue panel, a green panel? But you're looking at somewhere, call it 0.25, somewhere in that range. And you'll see by this picture, if you include insulation, you could actually get all the way down to a 0.07. Now, not typically something we would fully recommend because it reduces your light transmission, which is important, but there are options. I think that's the big thing to keep in mind. So that's just kind of talking through and when and if you guys ever have a job with translucent daylighting, with hopefully you do, all that information is readily available either from your manufacturer or from we'll talk a little about the NFRC. But that information is out there, and we can provide that for you if you need to match and meet certain thermal performance. Sound transmission blocking augmentation. So kind of like I mentioned prior, we can have additional layers of polycarbonate that can reduce sound transmission. So we don't see this a lot. It's not a real common occurrence. So it's not something I would say day to day you're going to deal with in the translucent daylighting world. But again, options. It gives you options and design flexibility. I've seen it more with like music or dance studios, something like that. But just know, I think the takeaway is that that option is out there for you if it's something you need. Same thing with military use. Um, we'll see a decent amount of polycarbonate and fiberglass used in military buildings on military plants. You can utilize the system. I mentioned the 5-minute forced entry. There's blast ratings. There's a variety of testing that gets done and is usually required on military bases that we have the ability to provide with the polycarbonate or fiberglass. So again, I wouldn't worry too much about the kind of the real nitty-gritty details of this right now. I would just make sure you guys understand that it's out there, and when and if that time comes, there's resources to help you along and help you design the building as needed. I don't know, obviously how much we have a variety of attendees on here and a variety of different geographies, and obviously probably a variety of different focuses of buildings. So you may or may not work with military buildings or facilities, but if you do, that there is options out there for you. Thermal performance. So this just talks about kind of the wide range that we have out there with the insulation that can be added. You have quite a bit of design flexibility. The other thing to note with FRP panels and polycarbonate panels are they are not sealed. So those panels, when they go in, are not then sealed throughout each of their seams. So it allows those panels to breathe. It is a thermally broken system, so if that comes up, FRP system has thermal breaks on it, and the polycarbonate doesn't have exposed aluminum, so it's kind of naturally inherently already thermally broken. So if that question comes up, that's something we have. And then from a system configuration, this just talks about design flexibility. So you see up on the top picture up there shows not only because a lot of times this product, whether it be polycarbonate or fiberglass or glass, is used in a very straight application, right? Walls, flat skylights. This is just showing not only from a like curvature, but also design flexibility. That canopy that you see up there over a restaurant provides not only a very unique and cool aesthetically looking product with the shape, it also shows pretty eccentric colors out there as well. So I think that's the thing to keep in mind is the design flexibility that you can get with translucent daylighting. It doesn't just have to be white or off-white like you see down below in a gym. For that gym, that makes sense. I think that's a Mexican restaurant up there, they want some color and a little bit of flair to it. You'll often see this product gets used quite a bit with sports. So whether that be professional or college or high school, they want to bring their team colors into the gym or into the practice facility is well, you'll see the product get used quite a bit. So like that picture down below, sometimes you'll see if that was the Springfield, Red Hawks, they'll use some red panels in there to just bring a little school spirit to, to the building. So that's something you'll see a lot, pretty prominent in sports, college, high school facilities. Specialized performance options. So again, if there's one thing you take away, and I've said it a bunch of times, but flexibility. There's flexibility in these products. So if you're down in Florida and you need to be in a HVAC zone, which is high velocity hurricane zone, there's products that can meet that. If you need a Class A roof construction, there's products that can meet that. We already talked about forced entry. You can mix glazing options like we talked about. You can incorporate glass with polycarbonate or vice versa. So the design flexibility is there. And if you need certain levels of performance criteria, I guess I won't go as far as saying there's always an option, but in almost every situation, there's going to be a design option for you, depending on what your qualifications are. So the next section, we just talk a little bit about codes. And admittedly, this is not really my area of expertise. So if we do have some more detailed questions, we may can follow up. But basically, what this is telling you is obviously LEED is very important in LEED certification. You have a variety of ways to get LEED points on your buildings by using translucent daylighting, whether that be polycarbonate or fiberglass. So these are just some examples. Obviously, those are on a job-by-job basis. There's help that can be provided if that's something that's important to you. But the takeaway is that there is a variety of LEED ways to get LEED points with translucent daylighting. Also, well building standard and BREEAMs. I don't know how familiar everyone is with those. And like I said, not my area of expertise to be fair. But there are a variety of ways that translucent daylighting can fit into these categories as well. So just know that if that's something that's important to some of the designs that you guys are working on. And then the IECC, which is International Energy Conservation Code. So these are things that are looking at your U factor, which again, U factor is your inverse of your R value, but it's your thermal performance. Also, it's looking at things like solar heat gain coefficient. And so what the IECC does is they actually mandate a third party to certify all that testing. So the NFRC, which is the National Fenestration Rating Council, that is kind of the go-to third party that does all the independent studies and testing of translucent daylighting. So whether that's U factor, solar heat gain coefficient, visible light transmission, those are all things get measured by a third party, which is the NFRC. So when you need and if you need NFRC testing, those you can find those on the NFRC site. The site itself is, I would say, not the most user-friendly, can be a little bit difficult to navigate. I would go towards your manufacturer who's going to have what you need pretty more readily available. But just know that if you hear, NFRC, that's essentially the third-party council that regulates and tests all of the translucent fenestration products. And then the last section here is really around case studies, which is, at the end of the day, pretty pictures showing everyone how this gets incorporated and the different design options you have. This particular building is a mall, is at a mall in Southern California. So you're seeing the skylights bringing in the natural light, which you don't see if you look down on the bottom floor. You're not seeing glare, you're not seeing sunspots, you're not seeing that type of stuff, which you often will see kind of in a mall. You're walking down a mall and you're walking on one side because the other side is just has a row of sun just blaring down on you, right? So that's what translucent does to avoid. This particular job is a polycarbonate. It's a ridge skylight system. So that's what's being shown here. This is a school. So this is one where we talk about incorporating multiple ways of daylighting. So this is predominantly a fiberglass, FRP. Those are the vertical panels you see there. But you also see there's glass on there as well. So there's some transparent that gives, in this situation, kids to look out, see if it's snowing or raining. but it reduces greatly that kind of glare that we had talked about. So this is just a example of some mixed use options that are out there. This is the building you probably wouldn't remember, but early on in the presentation, we showed two gentlemen working at a desk, and it was very well lit. That's actually this building. So what you can do with translucent daylighting is during the day, obviously you get that natural light, but then the reverse is at night. You can actually use it. A lot of times it gets used as a center point of a building, of a town center, of a town, because it looks at it, it almost shows up as like a beam of light, right? So you turn the lights on inside, and it really attracts people to it. So this is an art studio. So during the day they want the natural light, and then at night they want that what you see up there with the lights showing through the translucent, kind of like a beacon that's bringing them to that building for the art gallery, which is down below. So again, just some options you'll see below: all glass visibility, up top all translucent. This is another mixed use job. So this is just kind of a unique one from Indianapolis Zoo. So this is a low slope canopy that mixes, the types of glazing that some you can see out, some you don't. Again, options and different aesthetics, different design flexibility that it gives you. This is Texas A&M. So this is a ridge skylight. You'll see in the middle of that giant atrium space. And again, you could look at the second floor walkway. You can look down below at those tables, and what you're seeing is a very well lit building that doesn't have glare and heat, and that's ultimately what they wanted in that environment. This is a community center, so it's got kind of like a walkway around the end. So you'll see those spans there on the translucent daylighting. So it looks like you have one horizontal support there, and then on the outside, those panels. I mean, you see someone walking. Let's assume that person's somewhere between 5 and 6 feet, right? So that span is probably around 15 feet. So you're looking at one straight panel, 15 feet, somewhere in that range, maybe anywhere from 15 to 20 as it slopes up. And then you're probably gonna have you'll see one horizontal support there. But it allows you to you can see the taper of the wall too. So it gives you a little bit of flexibility there that you can come. And those products come out, they're already pre-cut. So that to get that look that you see out there, those are not sent out as all, let's just say the tallest one's 22 feet. Those aren't all sent out at 22 feet for an installer to cut those down. Those are cut and made and assembled and fabricated to the exact height and slope in a factory. Then they come out, makes ease of installation very high. So that is all that I had. I wanted to make sure. I apologize if that seemed a little quick, but I know you guys have sat through, some of you, 3 of these already, so I appreciate that. And 2, I wanted to make sure we left any time for any other questions that you might have. But I think the takeaway for me, if you were to walk away at the end late on a Friday after sitting through 4, is design flexibility. So translucent daylighting is going to bring natural light into your buildings. It's going to do it without glare, without heat, without sunspot. So it's going to give you that natural light without the negatives that come with the direct sun. You have a lot of design flexibility in what you can do with it, both from a look, a color, a bend, a curve, and you have a variety of options that are out there, whether that be a polycarbonate, a architectural grade polycarbonate, to a fiberglass are the most common. And so design flexibility is out there, and the support is out there. So if you need help, we're here to help. And no matter what your scenario might be, like I said, whether that's a school, retail, whether that's military, there's options that are to be had out there. So with that being said, that kind of concludes the formal AIA portion. I can kind of take off my AIA hat now and put on my Kingspan hat a little bit. I think we have about 15 minutes left. So for any questions, I'll stop sharing so I can, Daniel, maybe at least see the group if there's still a group out there to be seen. But any comments, questions, thoughts on some of that material? Again, I know it's the end of a long day. I know it's a Friday. So I appreciate everyone jumping on. But any questions for me or anyone else from Kingspan that might be on here?
I've got one, and I've had my fingers crossed that I wouldn't forget it. And then there is also a typo. Maybe I should just type in my own questions. Um, that second to the last photo, yeah, I think it was the community center. You made a comment there that I found intriguing. Factory cut, ready to install. Because of the slope and everything, and I know with like simple example is handrails, they have to wait a certain time before they come and measure that. Do you lean on accurate design drawings, or do you do the same and wait for um, uh, a certain point of construction, then measure, and then finally ship and deliver?
So what we'll do, our typical process is so if the full process would be of a job life cycle is when a job's coming out, there's obviously you have your drawings and your spec out there. We're going to start by quoting the product, right? So it's going to come into KLA. Usually comes directly from an installer. They're looking for a quote on, Jefferson Middle School. So we will quote that product. When that job is won, we will do all the shop drawings on it. So we'll perform all the shop drawings and we'll give them back to the customer. At that point, the job's in the customer's hands. We wait to get all the dimensions and measurements verified. So they'll go out and field measure, get everything confirmed, measured, signed off on. And then at that point, we will start the fabrication of the product. So there's always that we have our initial spec and drawing. We quote based on
Mhm.
that to the best of our ability. We do the shop drawings, we get them back out, and then we get field measurements. We get all those dimensions confirmed and back to us before we actually start any fabrication.
So for a building envelope, is there a time between, say, the superstructure being up and the, because now obviously they're trying to get dried in. Is there a time that is a designer and recommendation as an architect to the owner uh, that we should, plan on that time from shop drawing to installation?
Yeah, so our typical timeline for us, so we'll do shop drawings in usually about 3 or 4 weeks. So let's just say, ABC Glazing gives us a quote. We'll turn around a quote to them in a couple days. So they'll have the quote, project goes out to bid. Once they're actually ready to order from us, they hand us an order. It'll take us about 3 or 4 weeks to do the shop drawings. Once we hand the shop drawings over, essentially it's out of our hands at this point. So now it could take a couple days, could take a couple weeks, could take a couple months, whatever that may be. Once we have everything back once we have confirmed measurements and everything, you are looking at for us will be about 14 to 16 weeks to get it fabricated and sent out to you. So you're going to be looking at 3 to 4 months that you would have before product actually gets out the site and gets installed.
Okay, thanks.
But yeah, it's meant to be almost like an erector set. A goes A clip, B goes to
Right.
B clip, C goes to C. I mean, on a very standard wall, that framing system on the outside of each frame, there's basically a male and female end. And so you literally start at one end and you just clip, 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 and it goes right in. The whole system is already fabricated. So yeah, it's meant to have as little on-site, cutting, anything like that as possible.
Okay. Uh, Online question: what is the lifespan of polygon areas in a skylight application that gets full sun, say over the glass, etc.? Best
Yeah.
example, Arizona.
Yeah, I
It
mean,
wasn't my question.
yep. So, from a Kingspan perspective, Kingspan has the leading warranty in the system. So the product itself is warranted for 20 years, as far as any material defects and things like that. Any product over time is obviously going to kind of fade and weather a little bit. You'll tend to see polycarbonate get a little bit more to the life cycle than FRP is typically what we've seen. You will just to kind of get out in front, the negative that people will sometimes think about or associate with fiberglass is it turning yellow. There's old fiberglass out there that did used to yellow over time, 15, 20 years. You could see quite a bit of yellowing. That is still out there to some extent. From a Kingspan perspective, quite a bit ago, the fiberglass manufacturers changed, so you will not see that yellowing, but that's something that comes up. People are like, oh, does that stuff yellow? That's a bit of a kind of an old school fiberglass material thing. You will still see it yellowing to a little bit of an extent when it fades. Where polycarbonate, the product is more from the blue family. So as you see a little bit of fading, it's a little bit more of a blue. The most common polycarbonate colors are white, ice, and so you really don't see a lot of fading in them. So typical life cycle, I mean, the product's warranted for 20 years. You can often get, it's almost like a roof, 25 to 30, and then you might start to get a little wear, on it. But you could expect 20 years at least out of it.
Okay.
Um,
Um,
yeah, I see the questions here now. Does Kingspan provide
oh,
engineering of the system and help with detailing connections and transitions? Yep, absolutely. So we have a fully engineered system. We have a staff of engineers. They work on every job, and that could be So first of all, we're talking wind loads, snow loads, everything like that. They're going to design it and engineer it, and they will also help with transitions, with clips. We have many people know Kingspan for their insulated metal panels. That's what the main product that Kingspan offers. We are Kingspan Light Air, but we have a clip and a transition system. So if you wanted to use KIP, Kingspan insulated metal panels, and then you wanted to transition to some polycarbonate daylighting, we would provide all those details that could show you how to make that transition from, say, an insulated metal panel to a translucent daylighting. So yes, we have resources available. I talked about daylight modeling and things like that. We are here to help with stuff like that. So if there's some daylight modeling that needs to get done, that's stuff that we can do as well.
and that's
Uh,
detailing and so forth to help the designer, not necessarily waiting all the way until the shop drawing.
oh yeah, that's way up front. So
Okay,
we
good.
actually have a team. So something unique to Kingspan, like myself and Josh, who's on the call, we're sales folks, right? So we're out there working with contractors, GCs, installers, architects, but we have a team we have an architectural support team. So if you are day one, early on, you are just sitting down to design this building and I want to put daylighting into it. I've never used daylighting. I'm not sure where. I'm not sure how. I don't know how to space my purlins, my rafters. We have an architectural support team that could actually work with you early on. It's not something we charge for. It's hey, we have someone that handles polycarbonate. We have someone that handles fiberglass, and they could sit down and help you actually lay out your building to optimize the daylighting and optimize your structural spacing to incorporate that. So yeah, so when in doubt, if there's support that's needed, whether that be I need to know the thermal performance, can you get me your NFRC testing? We could have it to you too. I need help designing my building because my first time using translucent. We literally have people that can help with that. So don't be afraid to ask. We want to get involved because the more we get involved up front, the better it's going to be for everyone. The less changes are going to have to be made later. The design's going to be optimized as far as spacing and spans and things like that. So the sooner you can get Kingspan involved, the better. And I guess the other thing, I know there's one more question. That the other thing to just remember with Kingspan that essentially no other company has is there's obviously lots of different variety of options out there. There's plenty of glass manufacturers. There's a few polycarbonate manufacturers. There's a few fiberglass manufacturers. What there isn't outside of Kingspan is someone that offers everything. So I think that's the one thing now that my AIA hat's off and my Kingspan hat's on to remember is no matter what that daylighting option is, Kingspan will have a solution. So we have glass, we have polycarbonate, we have fiberglass, we do walls, ceilings, skylights. So no matter what the application is, if there's a daylighting option needed, if Kingspan can't offer it, likely nobody can. So the what we are in the industry is kind of your one-stop shop for all things daylighting. I see this other question. He sort of answered that, but what about deferred submittal or documentals that need to be submitted to AHJs? Sorry, what is AHJs?
Authority having jurisdiction.
Sorry, what was that, Daniel?
Authority having jurisdiction.
Um,
Basically, your code official, or if it's like the federal government, someone representing.
yeah, I mean, we deal with that. So we'll work with them like out in California as an example. There's for any schools, there's a different system that we have to go to and get approvals from them. And so we can work with we work with we could work with it's called DSA out there, but we've worked with different entities and organizations that needed certain levels of approvals before we actually go put anything into fabrication. So we have the support team to work on those and help out as needed. So if there's something like that that comes up, we have both our team and our local independent reps that are out there that can help provide those things.
Anyone
Mm.
else have any questions?
And then Daniel, I know there's obviously there'll be a form to fill out for everyone to obviously get their credits.
Yes.
Is there a way for you to share or what's the best way to potentially share my contact information? That way, if anyone, either has a question that they don't feel comfortable asking on here or is new to translucent daylighting and has something coming up, what's the best way to potentially share contact information?
Questions like, are cabbage patch really filled with babies? Oh, no.
Yeah.
Um, Great. That in itself is a good question. I don't think I've had anyone ask that. Um, what I will do is if
I mean, I can
you,
even as simply as I could put my email and phone number in the chat if anyone wants it, or I just didn't know if there's
yeah,
with the invites that went out, if there's a way to, not only with me, obviously, but probably for the other presenters of, hey, if you have follow-ups, here's that information.
yeah, typically what I'll do is I will not only download, perfect for those of you that see the chat, Greg, grab Greg's easy
Easy for
info.
you to say.
I will also, yeah, I know. I will also send you not only the survey at the end, which that's only the people that want the certificates, but also the full registration. So if you want to reply and hand out that information, I think it lets you do a 2-for-1 at that point. But we'll
Yeah.
give everyone a minute to from the chat grab that information. Great
Perfect.
presentation. Well, yeah, it's number 4 and everyone's ready to start their weekend. I really appreciate the presentation, the information, very helpful. I'm glad it was the last one because I was looking forward to it when I saw it pop up on the list.
Yeah.
Hopefully everyone felt the same way. It was very good, Greg. Thank you so
And
much.
then
And
so
to
just to
your
be clear,
team,
Daniel, they'll fill it out and then you'll get that over to us as far as getting everything with the.
yeah, so at the end of this presentation, everyone, you'll should get a pop up from your web browser, and there will be 2 choices: stay on the Zoom site or go to CSINext. Choose the CSINext one. That's where the survey is, and then you can fill out requesting certificate. Give Greg 5 out of 5 stars so that Yelp doesn't you know cut him off at the knees. No, I'm kidding. And if you do need AI registration, include the number there also. And any comments about this or potential future programs, we always love that kind of feedback at CSINext. But I usually give it the weekend. If you don't get that web browser today, everyone, you should be getting a follow-up email tomorrow, and give you the same link. If that doesn't show up, just shoot an email to info@csi.next, and we will make sure we get that information to Greg and his team to get those registered and finish that contact information.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Daniel. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the opportunity of having us on, and obviously everyone that for anyone that stuck through all four, appreciate that. I know that's a long day on a Friday, but I
I
appreciate the
think
questions, and yeah,
yeah.
my contact info is in the chat, so don't hesitate to reach out. And yeah, if nothing else, appreciate Daniel, and everyone have a great weekend. Happy holidays.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.